Hey there, this is Amelia here. Welcome to Amelia's Crossdressing Story. Today we are going to share a story called Valentine with Femboy by Crow. For more interesting and exclusive stories, please subscribe to my channel and support me at Patreon. In the dimly lit living room of Chris' house, the flicker of the television screen cast an ever-changing glow on the faces of two young men, Chris and Ben, entrenched on the worn-out sofa that had seen better days. They were friends from university, bonded over countless all-nighters and shared frustrations over difficult game levels and bosses. It was Valentine's Day, but for Chris and Ben, it was just another evening filled with video games, greasy pizza slices, and the bitter taste of beer that somehow felt more pronounced tonight. The house was unusually quiet, with Chris' parents out for their romantic dinner and movie night, and his sister spending the night at her boyfriend's place, leaving the two friends in a bubble of their own camaraderie and solitude. As their avatars danced across the screen in a chaotic ballet of pixels and sound effects, the conversation inevitably veered towards the topic of Valentines and the glaring absence of romantic interests in their lives. "Man, it sucks not having girlfriends on a day like this," Chris muttered, his gaze not leaving the screen as he deftly maneuvered his character out of harm's way. Ben, sprawled next to him with a slice of pizza in one hand and a game controller in the other, nodded in agreement. "Tell me about it." "But hey, at least we've got games and pizza, right?" The mood was light, filled with the ease of friendship that allowed for banter and jest. It was then that Ben, perhaps spurred by the lightheartedness of their conversation, mentioned something that caught Chris off guard. "You know, speaking of girls, half the university, myself included, has a crush on your sister," he said, a cheeky grin on his face as he took a swig from his beer bottle. Chris felt a twinge of awkwardness at the mention of his sister in such a context, especially coming from Ben. "Knock it off, man. That's just awkward, thinking about a friend dating my sister," Chris replied, trying to keep the tone jovial yet firm, hoping to steer the conversation away from dangerous waters. However, Ben, perhaps emboldened by the alcohol or the comfort of their friendship, pressed on. "You know, you're kind of similar to her. Especially with that feminine style of dressing you've got going on." The words hit Chris like a cold splash of water, striking a chord deep within him. It was true that Chris had always leaned towards a more androgynous style, often blurring the lines of traditional male fashion. But what Ben didn't know, what no one knew, was the depth of Chris' exploration into femininity. Secretly, whenever he was alone at home, Chris would find solace and expression in wearing his sister's clothes, embracing a side of him that felt too vulnerable, too real to share with the world. It was his deepest secret, a hidden facet of his identity that he guarded fiercely, now unwittingly brushed against by Ben's offhand comment. The room suddenly felt smaller, the air heavier, as Chris grappled with the unexpected exposure of a truth he wasn't ready to face, let alone discuss. Chris' heart was racing, the pulsating rhythm almost drowning out the sound of the video game in the background. His palms were sweaty, clinging to the game controller as if it were a lifeline. The casual, almost flippant remark about his feminine style of dressing had opened a door Chris had kept firmly shut, even to himself at times. The atmosphere of Valentine's Day, coupled with the slight buzz from the beer, had loosened a barrier within him, urging him towards a precipice he'd never dared approach. With a shaky breath, Chris ventured into the unknown, his voice barely above a whisper. "You know, I've actually tried on her clothes and makeup a few times." The words felt foreign, yet liberating as they hung in the air between them. Chris couldn't bear to meet Ben's gaze, fearing the judgment, the possible revulsion, or worse, the end of their friendship. His stomach twisted into knots as he braced for a reaction, any reaction. Ben's response was not what Chris expected. There was confusion, yes, but none of the hostility or derision Chris had feared. Instead, a spark of curiosity flickered in Ben's eyes as he leaned in. "Really? Have you got any pictures?" The question was asked with a genuine intrigue that took Chris by surprise. Admitting to never having taken pictures due to embarrassment and insecurity, Chris felt vulnerable yet strangely relieved to share this hidden part of himself. Ben's next words felt like a balm to Chris' frayed nerves. "If you need an opinion, I'm here, man." It was said with such nonchalance, finishing off his beer, as if they were discussing something as mundane as game strategies or pizza toppings. The offer, the acceptance, felt like a weight lifting off Chris' shoulders. A smile, genuine and wide, spread across his face, reflecting a mixture of surprise and gratitude. Emboldened by Ben's reaction and the unique opportunity presented by the empty house, Chris proposed a daring plan. "How about you run to the local store for more beer and snacks? I'll take advantage of the empty house and do a quick makeover." The suggestion hung between them, audacious and bold. Ben's agreement was the final nudge Chris needed. As Ben set out for the store, Chris felt a thrilling mix of excitement and nervousness. The night had taken an unexpected turn, leading him to a moment of truth he'd never envisioned sharing, especially with Ben. The prospect of revealing this deeply personal aspect of himself, under the guise of a light-hearted challenge, seemed like the perfect blend of vulnerability and safety. With each step Ben took towards the door, Chris felt more determined, ready to embrace this part of himself openly for the first time. As Chris steps into his sister's room, a familiar yet always thrilling sense of taboo washes over him. The room, filled with her scent and the essence of her personality, feels like a sanctuary and a forbidden zone all at once. He approaches the dresser with a sense of purpose, his hands slightly trembling as he sifts through the neatly arranged garments. The choice of a red lingerie and stockings set with a garter belt seems almost predestined for this night, each piece a whisper of daring and desire. As the soft fabric of the lingerie settles against his smooth, shaved skin, a familiar comfort envelopes him. Chris has always gravitated towards a femboy aesthetic, maintaining his body in a way that blurs traditional gender lines, finding solace in the ambiguity and the freedom it offers. Slipping into the stockings, attaching them to the garter belt with trembling fingers, Chris feels a blend of excitement and nervousness coursing through him. Each snap of the garter is like a heartbeat, quickening with anticipation. When he finally steps into the dress, pulling it up and feeling it hug his form, the transformation feels near complete. Standing before the mirror, Chris is met with a reflection that feels more authentic than any other. The person staring back at him is both familiar and astonishing, a beautiful amalgam of his hidden desires and his outward existence. The red of the lingerie and dress seems to ignite something within him, a fierce yet fragile flame of self-recognition and yearning. His inner thoughts swirl with a tumultuous mix of fear, excitement, and a deep-seated longing for acceptance. Is this really me? He wonders, tracing the lines of the dress, the contours it accentuates, and the way it makes him feel both powerful and exposed. The thrill of Ben's impending return adds a layer of urgency to his reflection, a desire to be seen and affirmed, yet also a fear of rejection or misunderstanding. In this moment, before the mirror, Chris finds himself at the crossroads of vulnerability and empowerment, his heart aflutter with the possibilities and risks of the night ahead. The excitement is palpable, a vibrant pulse that echoes through the quiet of the house, filling him with a sense of daring he's seldom allowed himself to embrace. Seated at the vanity, Chris' hands move with a practiced grace, albeit tinged with a nervous energy. The foundation smooths over his skin, concealing imperfections and creating a canvas that feels both familiar and alien. With each stroke of the brush, each line of eyeliner, and the careful application of eyeshadow, he watches as his reflection transforms, the masculine edges softening under the alchemy of cosmetics. The false lashes, a challenge to apply with hands that won't stop trembling, add a dramatic flair to his eyes, making them appear larger, more expressive. The application of blush brings a healthy, vibrant color to his cheeks, a stark contrast to the usual pallor. But it's the red lipstick that feels like the final seal, a bold statement of intent and identity. With meticulous care, he traces the outline of his lips, filling them in with a color that mirrors the dress, a vibrant, daring red that seems to shout defiance and desire all at once. Turning his attention to the wigs, Chris sifts through the collection, each one a testament to his sister's creative endeavors in cosplay. He selects one that closely resembles her hairstyle, the strands feeling alien yet comforting as he positions it on his head. Adjusting it to sit just right, he looks up, and the person staring back at him is a stranger, someone embodying a dream he's scarcely allowed himself to acknowledge. In this moment, adorned in the trappings of his secret self, Chris feels a rush of exhilaration mixed with a pang of vulnerability. The makeup, the dress, the wig, they all coalesce into a persona that feels truer than any he's presented to the world. But it's a persona fraught with fear, the fear of being seen and judged, yet also a burning desire to be accepted and understood. The sudden ring of the doorbell slices through his reverie like a knife, startling him back to the present. The sound is jarring, a harsh reminder of the reality waiting just beyond the walls of this sanctuary. His heart pounds in his chest, a wild rhythm that speaks of excitement and terror in equal measure. The time has come to reveal this hidden part of himself to Ben, to step out from the shadows and into the light of judgment or acceptance. With a deep, steadying breath, Chris rises from the vanity, the stranger in the mirror watching him with eyes full of hope and fear, ready to face whatever comes next. When Chris opens the door, the shock on Ben's face is palpable, his eyes wide as they take in the transformation. "What the heck, dude, is that really you?" he blurts out, his voice a mix of astonishment and disbelief. Chris, cheeks flushed with a mix of embarrassment and shy pride, nods, barely able to meet Ben's gaze. To Chris' surprise, Ben's initial shock quickly gives way to a smile, genuine and warm. "You look super cute," he says, and there's something in his tone, a thread of sincerity and acceptance, that makes Chris' heart flutter with a mixture of relief and happiness. They retreat back to the living room, the dynamic subtly shifted. The video games are forgotten, replaced now by a selection of movies that play in the background, more a backdrop to their conversation than the focus of their attention. Snacks are passed back and forth, beer cans opened and sipped, the atmosphere casual yet tinged with a new, unspoken intimacy. As the movie flickers on, the conversation drifts naturally. Ben, with a casual curiosity that puts Chris at ease, asks, "How long have you been doing this?" Chris, bolstered by Ben's earlier acceptance, confesses that it started around the time they began university. Ben's reaction is one of quiet impressment, his eyes occasionally flicking over Chris, taking in the careful makeup, the well-chosen outfit, the overall effect stunning in its authenticity and boldness. As the evening wears on and the beers take effect, the space between them feels charged with a new energy. The casual chatter continues, but there's an undercurrent of something more, a shared understanding and a deepening connection that neither of them had anticipated. The atmosphere, once filled with the comfortable familiarity of friendship, now thrums with an intimate tension, the boundaries of their relationship subtly expanding to encompass this new, uncharted territory. As the night deepens and the glow from the television casts flickering shadows across the room, Chris finds himself acting on a compulsion he can't fully understand. Moved by an invisible force, his hand tentatively finds its way to Ben's thigh, the contact light but charged with a multitude of unspoken questions and possibilities. Ben's reaction is one of confusion, his body tensing slightly under the unexpected touch, a nervous laugh escaping him as he tries to decipher Chris' intentions. Chris, emboldened by the beer and the emotions swirling within him, leans in closer, their faces just inches apart. The tension in the air is palpable, a delicate balance between apprehension and curiosity. Ben, caught in the moment's gravity, chuckles nervously, his voice tinged with hesitation, "Dude, what are you doing, isn't that gay?" The question hangs between them, loaded with societal implications and unvoiced fears. Chris, however, with a confidence he's never felt before, lets his finger trace a path along Ben's thigh, a playful yet daring gesture. "Of course not, silly," he replies, his voice a low murmur, weaving a spell of intimacy in the dimly lit room. Leaning in even closer, so their lips are almost touching, Chris breathes the words, a whisper laden with suggestion and an offer of companionship in their shared solitude. "Not having a girlfriend doesn't mean we need to be lonely this Valentine's Day." The air between them is electric, charged with the potential of crossing a boundary both had never anticipated exploring. As their eyes lock, a silent question is posed, and Chris, with a vulnerability and boldness that surprises even himself, offers, "Do you want me to be your secret femboy Valentine?" The question, whispered with a mix of hope and fear, hangs in the air, a proposition that challenges the very nature of their friendship and the boundaries they've known. That's all for now, see you in the next video. Please subscribe my channel and support me at Patreon for exclusive stories.